everyone, and thank you for joining us. Today, we are gathered for Kathy's Corner. This is a special time each month where we gather to talk about the physical artifacts, the materials that we've collected as a family, and how we can preserve them in the long run, learn what we can from what they are, and take that going forward. And today, we are not only privileged to have Kathy Stone with us, our cornerstone to Project Kin, but also a special guest with her, Hazel Thornton. So, Kathy, I'm going to turn it over to you and let you make an introduction for Hazel.
Thanks, Barbara. So, welcome, first Kathy's Corner of 2025. And I know this is a time of year when a lot of people are organizing their photos or at least have put that on a resolution. So it seems like a good time for the topic we're going to talk about for the next few Kathy's Corners. I'm not sure how many we'll stretch this out for, or how many it'll take me to cover them all, but we talked about the 8 steps to take your photos from tubs to tales of yore. And in the first year of Kathy's Corner, and last year we went through some of those steps in more detail. And we're going to shift a little bit, because when you're sorting your photos and your memorabilia, you often come across those photos where you're not sure, or a piece of memorabilia or a document where you're not too sure who, what, where, when, why. And sometimes we toss them, which is not necessarily the best strategy off at the top. And sometimes we set them aside. I was a setter aside, and then you have a pile at the end just to keep moving. It's not a bad strategy to get through the stuff, is set the unknown pile aside, and then come back to them. And that's kind of what we're going to do for the first few sessions of Kathy's Corner this year, is look at finding this information in the photos themselves and in the images, because both could give us a lot of clues to those I don't know what they are, the 5 W's of what's in the image. And if you're just starting out and you're back at step 1 of gathering and sorting, I think you'll still get a lot out of this, because it'll help you with your photos as you go through them, with deciding, should I just toss this, or should I hang on to it until I can find out more information about it? Of course, I'm big in favor of don't toss it. Let's figure out what it is, because be ashamed to toss out pictures of your great grandparents or something because you didn't recognize them. So that's what we're going to talk about. So I invited my friend Hazel Thornton, and thank you so much, Hazel, for joining us. I'm going to read this so I don't miss anything. Hazel's an author, a genealogist, and a retired professional organizer. She encountered many photo collections during her career as an organizer. This led her to become a professional photo manager as well, which is where I met Hazel, through the photo managers. All these experiences led up for her to write the book, What's a Photo Without the Story? And in that book, I'm going to hold the book up now. This book is delightful. It's a really fun read. A lot of books you read about how to find stuff out, but they're kind of boring. Hazel is not a boring writer. Hazel is a delightful writer. There's great stories in here and really good information. And it's geared for everyone to look at, whether you're working on your own photos or someone else's. It's just a great read. And I think Barbara is going to pop links where you can get it into the blog. But I was looking at the book again as I was getting ready to do this session, and I thought, I should tell this story that Hazel tells at the beginning of the book. And then I thought, well, wouldn't it even be better if Hazel just came and told the story herself? So thank you again, Hazel, and the floor is yours.
Well, thank you, Kathy. Thanks for inviting me and for saying that you found my book delightful. The story that she's talking about, again, it's on the cover of the book. That's the picture we're talking about right now. And I'm going to share my screen and tell you more about that photo. Okay, so allow me to introduce you to my paternal grandmother, Hazel Ellery Clay Thornton. Doesn't she look fun? I think she looks fun. Sadly, I never met her. She died when my dad was just 16, and I can hardly believe this, but I was 60 years old before I ever saw this photo. And I feel gypped. But I was grateful that I finally did meet her via this photograph. And I, I had a lot of questions about it. It was so intriguing to me that it became it inspired my book, What's a Photo Without the Story? And so I tell a lot of, it's not all about my family, but I do use my family as examples. And this is the longest story in the book. I had a lot of questions looking at this picture. I call it bathing beauty. That's just me. That's what I call it. And some of my questions were, well, I knew who it was. It wasn't a complete mystery photo. I knew who it was. And that's because my dad was alive at that time. Even though I'd never seen the picture before, he was alive to tell me that that's who it was. But he couldn't answer any other questions about it. I wanted to know, where is this? What beach is this? What hotel is that? Or maybe it's an apartment building. I don't know. And I still don't know. Oh, no, I do know. I do know the answer to that. And I was also kind of intrigued by the fact that he didn't know any of the answers. I knew by looking at the bathing suit that, and I verified it by Googling it, that it was a 1920s era, and also because of how old she looks and what I knew of her life, I knew that the photo was taken in the 1920s. But was it taken before or after her 1925 wedding? And who took the photo? Was that her honeymoon? She looks kind of flirtatious. I don't know if a girlfriend took it, before she was ever married, or if she was on her honeymoon and my grandpa took it. Some of these things I will never know. But I tried to find out as much as I could about the photo on my own. The first thing I did was I Googled beaches. Well, they lived in Southern California. I knew that much. So I Googled beaches in Southern California to see what hotels it could be. And I couldn't find anything that looked like this. And so I still didn't know. And I also asked my dad, where do you think this photo was taken? He didn't know, but he had a memory of, the only thing he could tell me about the beach was that he and his mom, when he was little, would get on the bus and go to the beach in Long Beach, California, and which is, as it happens, a bunch of years later, that's where I was born, is Long Beach. And he took his little shovel and his little pail on the bus with his mom, and he remembered those outings fondly. But he couldn't tell me a single thing about this photo. So the next thing I did, and I'm going to switch to the next picture. So I started doing some more research. The first thing I did was I asked my Facebook friends. I put the picture on Facebook, and I said, does anybody recognize this? Especially my Southern California friends. And it didn't take long for a couple of them to say, oh, we for sure know what that is. That's the Casa del Mar in Santa Monica. Well, you see, I've got an X through Casa del Mar in Santa Monica. And the reason is because the more I looked at this Casa del Mar, you'll see in the next slide, the more I looked at the Casa del Mar in Santa Monica, the more I thought, I could have stopped there. I really could have, but it just didn't look right to me, so I didn't stop there. And I even looked at beaches around the world to see if they'd maybe gone on a trip or something, to see what kind of big famous hotel it could possibly be. So eventually I contacted Maureen Taylor, the photo detective. And at the time, I had her book, The Family Photo Detective, and she has I'm not going to show it to you anyway, because I'm showing you this slide, but she's got a new edition of it out. And I called her for an official consultation. And she didn't solve the problem for me. What she did was, she set me on the path of what kinds of more questions to ask. And one of them was, were they known to travel? And they really weren't. She wanted to know if there were any other photos in the album from the same occasion. So I looked at the album, and there really weren't, because you can tell a lot from a photo about a photo from the other photos in the album if it was made at the time. And so she wanted to know, well, where did they live and what beaches were nearby. So I went to the census records to get their actual addresses in 1920 when they were both single living with their parents. And I see that they're not actually X'd out on this map that I added here, but they were kind of equidistant between the Santa Monica Pier and Long Beach. They lived in this general area, and it could have been either beach in terms of what was closest and easiest to get to, considering there were no freeways at that time. So I was looking at maps too of what roads were available at that time. And so although there were no other photos in the album from that same occasion, there were other photos in the album. And one of the ones that I found was this one on the bottom here that says Silver Spray Pleasure Pier. It's a picture of my grandpa and my aunt. My aunt was older than my dad. And so he's not in the picture. He wasn't born yet in this picture. But this picture of my grandpa and my aunt on the beach, I noticed that there was a building in the back with words on it. And so I zoomed in, and the words it says Silver Spray Pleasure Pier. So I Googled Silver Spray Pleasure Pier, and guess what? Guess where that is? It's in Long Beach. And so was kind of the family place to go. But still, that's after they got married. Who knows before they got married? But in the process of doing the research on Silver Spray Pleasure Pier, I found a depository of old postcards from the era. And this postcard on the bottom left, I found a picture of the Hotel Virginia in Long Beach, and learned about it and the fact that it was torn down in 1933. So on the top is the Bathing Beauty picture and the Mystery Hotel. On the right is the old postcard that I found. That is indeed where the photo was taken. And I also solved the mystery of why my dad didn't know. It's because that hotel was torn down after the Long Beach earthquake in 1933. Well, guess what year my brother, I keep saying that. Guess what year my dad was born? My dad was born in 1933. So it makes a little bit of sense that he didn't know anything about that hotel. He'd never seen it. But it's still kind of a mystery why my family didn't tell. I think a lot of people experience this though. Their families just don't tell the stories. They don't look at the pictures and they don't tell the stories. And that's why people like me and Kathy are telling the stories of the photos when we can. And that's why I wrote a whole book about it. Because to me, the story of that picture, it means so much to me. It would have been a shame if it had been lost altogether and if I had not done any research. So this picture on the lower left, that was the picture of the Hotel Del Mar in Santa Monica, not to be confused with the Coronado Del Mar in San Diego. And you'll notice that round portion of the building. When I was first looking at the photo, I was thinking, well, they could have added that on later, or any changes that I saw, it could have been added on later, because this is, but then when I found this particular picture and realized that it had been taken in 1910, I wished I had found it sooner, because I could have eliminated that as a possibility sooner. But I was thrilled to have solved that mystery, and it led to more telling of stories, not so much more mysteries, but telling, like if somebody else looked at some of the photos in my book, they would say, well, what's going on here? And if I don't tell the stories, and if you don't tell the stories, who's going to tell the stories? That's why we tell stories about our photos, right, Kathy? I caught her mid-drink.
Mid-drink muted. Yes, that's exactly why we do that. And part of what we do here at Project Kin too is try and get the stories behind the photos.
So that's my story. Did you have questions about my story?
I do.
Barbara.
So the picture is color, and while I
It's
could see
not.
that it might have been hand colored or it was colorized later,
It was colorized in the MyHeritage
I see.
feature that they have.
Yeah. Okay. Second question is
Oh,
there's something.
but I want
Oh,
to say something about that. I've not traditionally been a fan of colorizing, and but Maureen Taylor, the photo detective, I don't know that she suggested directly that I colorize this one, but I have heard her say in the past that if you do colorize photos or sharpen them up or whatever newfangled, tools there are for photos these days, you can sometimes see details that you couldn't before.
yeah, like red hair, for example.
And that's what interested me in the colorizing, is that, well, maybe I'll learn something if I do. And plus it
Yeah,
looks good on the cover of my book.
looks better. Yeah.
Perfectly fair. There's also something going on behind her over her left shoulder,
Yeah.
like a beach umbrella or something.
Well, that appears to me to be a person with their back to the camera wearing a hat.
I see. And the
And
buildings behind is like
the blackish ones, I think there's like
well,
a
the ones to the left of or our right of the hotel.
well, there's a yeah, see, you can tell from the top picture and the bottom picture that a new building has been built
Mm,
next to the hotel.
I see.
Yes.
Yeah.
But I don't know if that one is still there or not.
Yeah. Fascinating.
And then these guys
Fascinating.
over to her right look like they're playing volleyball or something.
Hmm.
yes. Yeah.
Well, that's a good point of the things that you can see in the background might well tell you things about a picture that you never like, a car, or, an invention that is an iPhone sitting there in the grass.
Uh, Well, any other questions for Hazel or comments? Perfect. So I thought that was a really good way to start off this section of what we're going to talk about, because we're going to talk about doing exactly what Hazel did with that photo of trying to figure out the who, the what, the where. And I guess Hazel's still working on who took the picture. So there will always remain unanswered questions, but that's what I wanted to kick off with, because I so much like that story. So, um, and again, there's so many tips in Hazel's book that I sound like I get a commission. I actually don't get a commission. I'm hoping next time I'm in Albuquerque, I'll at least get a cup of tea. But
Oh,
it's
you'll
such
get
a
more
good
than a
book.
cup of tea.
Yeah, it's such a good book that and lots of tips to help you work through the process, and more than just, doesn't just specifically gear in on identifying the stuff in a photo, but really helpful book. Um, so that's part why I wanted to talk about that, because that's sort of what we're going to dive into now, is how we can use the various different, and Hazel's given us a couple good examples of the different tools that we have to look at things in photos. So I have some very simple practical ones to start off with of helpful tools. If you're looking at an actual print, a magnifying glass, a jeweler's loupe, or like a lighted magnifying glass. I actually got something that was a headset, and it had lenses in it and lights on it. So then I could still use my hands while I was working with it. I was going to find it and wear it for you today, but I thought, no, couldn't find it. I'll promise that one to show up in one of the next Kathy's Corners. Um, so if you're working on a digital image, Zoom is your friend. Zoom, not Zoom, this Zoom, but zooming in the picture is your friend to look at parts of the picture. And there's so many more tools I can remember when Hazel, when you were working on this and writing your blog, was quite a while ago. There's probably like so many more tools available now with artificial intelligence too. So, and we'll talk about different tools. A family timeline of important dates and events, even if you're not a genealogist. A family timeline is just so useful, and it's worth the time to sit down and figure it out and write down as much as you can. I add to it when I find more things, or a family tree, or if you're lucky enough to find some genealogical records that somebody in your family's already dug up. Those kind of things can be invaluable for trying to figure out who's who in a picture. The other thing I've used, I had a picture in one of my clients' collections, and it was a group of children, and it was a cabinet card size. I'm gonna talk about that in a bit down in a few minutes. But we're looking at that thinking, we have no idea who these kids are. We don't know. There's 5 kids. We don't know who are they? Does this belong to the family? And so it went in that pile of things that we didn't know what they were. And down the road, I found an obituary, and it was the obituary for, it turned out to be one of the kids in that photo, and it listed all the siblings. And to that point, we didn't know this particular individual, who was she was the oldest girl in the photo, and most of the photos we had of her were when she was well into her 60s. And so the only thing we were thinking, that this must be somebody in the family, because it looked like my client's granddaughter, this young woman in the photo. Turns out it was in fact my client's grandmother, and those were her 4 siblings that were in the photo. And from the obituary, as soon as I read the obituary, and I went, light bulb went on, because it gave the kids in age order, and it was like, okay, this, and what, and obviously from their names, boys or girls, and I went, that's who that picture is of. So and that's what we're going to talk about, is how you can find hints that are, because a lot of us, we don't have anybody to ask, like, who's this, what's left, or like Hazel, your dad didn't remember, or to try and find this stuff. So Google, lots of books and websites, which we'll go through as we go. I'm to set a note to Barbara, I said, I'm not giving you all the resources yet, because I want to check that the links still work. And I've found 1 or 2 today already that don't work anymore. So did a little research. I'm going a lot on a presentation I made to the photo managers in 2020. It was supposed to be live, and we were going to do hands-on, looking at pictures and things. And then, you know what happened in 2020? Suddenly it was a virtual one. So I have a lot of pictures to show you, because everything that was going to be held up and shown in that class ended up being a photo. So I have to give credit to my fellow photo manager, Andy Willis. Her and I presented this jointly, and she's kindly given me permission to share some of the pictures we have and some of the research we did, which includes photos both from her private collection and mine of our family photos. So we'll have a look at a few of those, but and the lists of books and things, we'll add those as we go through the various sessions, and I get a chance to clean up my resource sheet. So other things that might be useful, and when we're talking about books, and Maureen Taylor, I think we put her link to her website in there. Maureen Taylor is really good for information too, because she has done a lot of work in looking at hairstyles, the vehicles, the landmarks, fashion, which is something that I actually met Barbara first at Instagram when she was trying to identify a car, and I had been looking at a whole bunch of car identifying, and said, hey, try this site. So that's another thing to look at. But we're going to look at both the physical construct of the photo itself, or the memorabilia, or the other media, as well as what's in it. Sometimes we focus only what's in the picture, when some of these other methods can help us. If you're looking at negatives or slides, I'd probably digitize them first, just so you're not looking at tiny images, but you can use viewers for those things. So a couple notes, I think I said this already. No, I didn't say this yet. If you're starting your process of sorting and organizing your photos, do not throw away the envelopes that things are in, or if they're in a little bound folder, don't throw those things away, because they may contain, or at least until you've looked at them and got the information copied off that goes with those photos. Same as backs of photos. That's one of the things where when I digitize, I do a lot of scanning of the back of photos, because sometimes and we'll look at that too, beyond what someone might have written on the back, because that's like a treasure when someone actually wrote on the back of the photo who it was, unless they write things like, I have two great Uncle Dans, and we just write Uncle Dan on the back of the picture, and I'm like, okay, don't know which Uncle Dan this is, so I got to research back further into there. But again, any writing on a photo is like gold that somebody actually took the time to write on them. So you want to be careful not to throw out any of your clues ahead of time. No, oh, my other one was, if you've ever heard the expression, close only counts in horseshoes and hand grenades, it also counts in dating photos, because if you can get an approximate date, way better than no date at all. So, and chances that you'll find, like, I don't think Hazel will ever figure out the exact day that photo was taken, but if you can even narrow it down to a decade or a group of years, that's gold. You don't need to try and figure out the exact day something was taken. And so what I'm going to do is, I initially was going to talk about how do you find the where, how do you find the when, and then I got thinking, no, let's take a more like a funnel approach. And I use that in my photo sorting, is how can we group things together that might that we might be able to research all at the same time. And I'm talking about things like sizes of photos, types of photos, like let's look at prints, then and types of photos, which we're going to look at some really old ones in a couple seconds here. Types of photos, the size. We're going to look at, okay, the word just escaped me. Scalloped edges, that's the edges of photos, because you can tell dates of different photos from the edge. If you've got a pile of photos that have a scalloped edge, and they're 2.5 by 2.5, chances are they're not taken the same time as that pile of 4x6s. So that's what I mean by funneling, is we're going to try and look at groups of photos when we're trying to find approximate dates before we move on to, and other hints, before we move on to actually looking at what's in the photo, because we may be able to do some things with a number of photos and then take a deeper dive into what's in the photo if we need to. Okay, so we'll take a look at some early photos. I'm going to share my screen. I think this is the screen I want. Share. Okay, that'll work. Pardon me, I'm going to look to the side because it's on my other screen. I got to move my meeting chat out of the way. So this is just a little fun for the starting. The bottom, the orange thing at the bottom, these are from somewhere in the 50s, because that's what I'm talking about by don't yank photos out of things before you look at what you have. That looked like just a little photo album to put things in that the printer put them in. King size pocket album of the snapshots. But if you look at the back, there was a calendar on there, and nobody circled the date exposed, but it did say you had the choice of 1956, 57, or 58. So that narrowed down what was in there to a 3-year gap. The photo on top, I always throw that in there just because I like to share the odd things Kathy has found in her clients' collection. So this, as you can see, that's a yardstick, not a meter stick as we have in Canada. So that picture is more than a yard long, and it looked like negatives, and it's teeny tiny photos, but they're not a negative, they're a print. So, and I'm still trying to figure out what it is. I believe it may have been that the person it belongs to, it's got a whole bunch of pictures of oil exploration a long time ago, and it may have been something that he developed himself, because I've asked several people. It's in my more research is necessary to figure out exactly, like, what is that and how did we do that? But it intrigued me when I found it, and it is literally more than a yard long. So also begs the question of how one stores it later on, but we'll skip that question today. Okay, so I got things I got to move everywhere there. We'll move that over. We're going to look back at old photos right now. And Barbara, if you could pop into the chat the phototree.com link. This is a wonderful source to explain what all these are. If you have any of these types of photos in your collection, you're really lucky, because these are few and far between, but some of the first photos were daguerreotypes. They were around about 19, these are approximate dates, 1839 to 1860. And this just gives you a few things that you're looking for. They were printed on silver-coated copper plate, so they may tarnish. You may find them very tarnished and think, what is this old thing? What else do we have there? They have a mirror-like surface, so the images appear to float on it. So if you hold it, it'll move and you could only see the image in a certain way. And they were often mounted in a case with matte and glass over it, which was a good idea to protect it. That was the most common size. Other things that can help with dating that, and it's in the article that I got Barbara to share, the shape of the mat changed over time. So that mat there is, I don't even know what you call that shape. No idea, but you see the shape. It's not an oval and it's not a square, or a rectangle. It's a decorative shape. The type of mat changes over time, which is another hint to your dating. And the case, the material of the case, whether they were originally made of leather and then they shifted to other materials later on. And the use of a preserver, and what a preserver was not preserving the photo, but it was another piece of a case they added to the image, because I guess they figured out these were very fragile. And so they came into use at a certain time. So those could all help with narrowing down the date. And of course, the fashion in the picture. And that's a big one that we use a lot, and that's true with almost any photo when we can look at the fashion. So that's a daguerreotype. And if you ever have one and you don't want it, I'll take it. Love to get my hands on one. The next sort of evolution was an ambrotype, and they were printed on glass. Both of these kinds, and the other thing we're going to look at in a second, you couldn't make another print. These weren't things you could make copies of. These were single printing. They were actually printed right on glass. It wasn't mirror-like. That's a way to find out the difference between an ambrotype and a daguerreotype. It isn't mirror-like. It was also mounted in a hinged case with matte and glass, and that's a picture of the type of camera that would have been used to take this. And again, things to help us identify more narrow down even the time frame of that are things like the style of the mat changed over time, the type of glass used, and what type of preserver it had on it. And again, the preserver was something that helped save the photo, wasn't a chemical preserver. I read that first and I thought, they put chemicals on them? And then I read it again and went, no, Kathy, that's not what that means. So those are ambrotypes. So we're still back in the 1800s with types of photos. And then came tintypes. Tintypes were around for quite a long time, around mid 1850s to around 1878 or a bit longer. They were printed on a blackened iron plate, hence the name, or piece of tin, the name tintype. Some are under glass, other ones are in paper sleeves, or they're just loose, which also can help us with the dating, depending on what they're contained in. Some were in albums, and they were, you could put these in an album. And I actually did see a tintype in a client's collection. It was loose in one of those, those pocket albums with the plastic ones that we loved in the 90s. It actually fell out when I was taking the rest of the photos out to take a picture of it. It fell right out. And it's like, oh my gosh. So you kind of want to care for these things a little better than just putting them in those things. So, again, the plate size and the color can also help with the date of the photo. So again, that article I posted, lots of information on that. So, and then I'm going to go quickly. Carte de visite, that was sort of what came next. And these are the thin paper glued onto cardstock. And you can see this one, the paper has gotten a little rough over time. The carte de visite was the first time that someone could print copies of a photo and get more than one, where they could make more than one copy of it. Carte de visite or cartes de visite, they also were something that people handed out, which hence the name of them. is that people handed them out sometimes like calling cards, or you could print several of the family and pass them out. Often you'll find, as we do on this one has a name written on it, which was wonderful. We're not too sure who Naughty was, but beside that, we had to do a little more research. But a lot of them also had the photographer's image and logo on the back. And those can be very helpful in identifying the time period of a photo. And I think, Barbara, I sent you a link to Cindy's list of photographers, which is another good place to look. Other characteristics that can help us date them are, they, as the note says there, they were very popular in the Second World War, and you'll find a lot of them with images from the Second World War, the Civil War, and you'll find images of the war and soldiers often on these little carte de visite. The card thickness is a way to help identify when it was taken. Card corners, the size of the image on the card, the borders of the card, what the borders are like, and later on they had props in the background. And so the use of studio props is another way we can date them. And I'm going to quickly stop my share, and I'm just going to show you a few. So just to get you an idea of the size. So there it is within my hands. Okay. I should have put gloves on, but I'll take it out of the case so we get less reflection. So that one does have the name on the back and all the information from the photographer. So it'll be easier to identify this. You'll also see a price tag on it because somebody was selling them, and I was like, oh, please don't put sticky Avery labels on the backs of photos from the 1800s. Like, but I've got over that. So but they were, a lot of them are portraits. There's another one. This one is in really good shape. Like, it's such, you know, given that this was taken in sometime in the 1800s, this is like in really good shape. And again, it's very elaborate on the back too. And I'm showing these to you rather than having scanned them because I looked at my scans, and I would almost suggest, if you've got these and you haven't scanned them yet, I would photograph them, because the scans have lost a lot of, I think camera scan would be fine, but you see that the gold embossing on the bottom, scanners don't like gold embossing. It turns out very gray. So I looked at some of my photos of them and I went, yeah, these don't look great. And that one that is on the slide is in fact a scan, but it didn't have embossing on it. So I've got all kinds here. And I think here's an example. I don't know if that's a prop, but it's got, now we have something in it. We've got a whole person, and we have some kind of something to investigate there in the background, either a wooden chair or a wooden fence or something. But we have more things in the background now than just a portrait image. I'll just quickly shuffle through and see if I can find any more with anything in the background. I can't. This is an interesting one because it's landscape and has 3 people in it. So they were used for family portraits. And again, a lot of detail on the back. I think quite a few of these that I purchased came from the same photographers, same family collection, and have very similar things on the back. So, okay, quickly, we'll go back to share. There we go. Share. I only have one more thing to share, but I'll do it anyway. Cabinet cards. So they came sort of around when the carte de visites were kind of waning in popularity, and these became more popular. They were bigger. You can't tell that from these, but they were. I'm gonna have. You can't see me because I'm small, but they're bigger. So they were like 6x4. A lot of them are portrait orientation too. So they were a much larger card. So they're clearer, they're brighter images. They had sepia or silver and black color to them. They were mounted on cardboard that was thicker than a carte de visite. And then again, we got there after the 1870s, they had rounded corners. And then after 1900, they had square corners. The popularity peaked at about the 1880s, but you still found them after that too. So, and again, for our dating these kind of photos, color of the card, meaning the card stock, the artwork printed on the card, the photographer's name or any other artwork on it. The card borders and edges vary from time periods, the type of photographic paper, and again, of course, with any of these, the dress and everything else in them, the what they're wearing, the style of dress, the hairstyles, this stern-looking gentleman with the big long beard. And then I'm going to turn my camera off in just a minute and show you some Cabra cards, but I'll just show you this one. Other vintage formats you may come across are the stereoscope. I'll show you that in a minute too, because those are my pictures. The stereoscope, the postcard, real photo postcards. So the photo postcards became popular around the 1900 to 1930s, and they are actual postcards. Some of them were mailed. One of my cousins has a collection that she inherited from an aunt that is a big photo album full of postcards that were sent back and forth, which is just with writing on them, like stories and stuff. So that's awesome. This is my aunt. I can't read. Great aunt. One of my great aunts in that one. And so that's showing the back of it. So, and then panoramic photos started to become popular after about 1988. This particular one is also between 3 and 4 feet long. So again, I'm looking for ideas of, I suggested, my best suggestion was to frame it with photo-safe museum glass, as opposed it came to me rolled up and I had to get it, there's a whole process to unroll photos and it took a long time. But I thought, I don't really know what to do with it now. I don't really want to roll it back up because, as you can see, rolling it up is tearing the edges and stuff. But this is a Presbyterian ministers conference sometime in the 30s. So in the panoramic view, which we still have panoramic photos today. I've got a pile of them in my collection too. So that's sort of, I was going to show you what cabinet cards looked like. Barbara, you can pop in the rest of those links because a lot of them are just related to some of what we talked about, just other sources. So this is the Grand Falls in Yellowstone. That is a stereoscope. So that device that I showed there to look at it, you look through the stereoscope and it put it into one photo and gave it dimension. So if you've come across these, a lot of them are, what am I trying to say? Tourist type photo that people could buy. This one is of the sacrificial stone at the court of the museum in Mexico City. And this is Bridal Falls in Yosemite. So I won't show them all to you, but, and then this is another, that's a different one. This is the back of, let me put it up the postcard way, up there. And if it's hard to see, but in the top corner where the postage stamp would go, there are symbols. And this can be a way of dating these cards. And I put the link in there where somebody tells us what all those little postage symbols are that would go under your stamp. And that helps with identifying the dates of them. I don't know if these were more popular with people of a lower income or what, or who, because I have quite a few in my family's collection. And we didn't have, that my family did not have a lot of money. So that seemed to be something that my grandparents immigrated to Canada in 1929. And it seemed to be something that family sent over to them in Canada, were these postcards. So, and I have one of my grandfather that's from would have been the when did World War I start? It's a picture of him when he joined the British Navy, and it's got an artificial background of a ship, with water, like it's got a painting in the background. I was trying to find it this morning, but it's securely stored somewhere in my collection, and I couldn't figure out which bin it was in right away. But it's another postcard. It's the picture was blown up and hung in my grandparents' house forever and ever. And then finally, I was going through the old photos. It was like, wow, that's that picture of Grandpa in the Navy, and it was actually a postcard. So there's all sorts of these things, and we'll move through time as we go through further sessions of Kathy's Corner. But this is some way to look at the very old pictures. I was just going to say I should show you a cabinet card or two, and so you get an idea of the size of those. So here's another one. And again, you can see the photo quality is much better than some of the older versions. And again, I think you would call this one where we have lots of props and things in the background with the picture and the photographer's name emblazed on the bottom. This one has round corners, so that would be one way we could date it by looking at the dates for round corners. We have this one, which again, if we're going to go through this one, these aren't my own. These are the ones that I don't know who these ones are. These will be detective work, but this obviously we'll need to look at the military uniform. And I think now we're lucky because we can use Google Lens to help us with a lot of that, where we used to have to either find books or search Google for all kinds of military uniforms and then try and match them. So this one is another one, and it's got square corners with a little bit of design in it. And this one doesn't appear to have the photographer on it. Wait, hang on. It's getting dark in Calgary now. I think it's very lightly embossed on the bottom of the photo. And then do we have more? Oh, there's another. I love this one with all that stuff in the background. Like that's just, and that would be one I might just go for the clothes first to try and figure out when that came from, because that's pretty awesome in the clothes. And that's got on the back, I don't know if you're there, the photographer's logo, and it's Mrs. Merrow. And it's somebody's friend, grandmother's friend. So that's where you write things on the back that may have been helpful at the time, but not too helpful now. And this is another one with the baby. And again, not just the baby, but sitting on a little bench. And the photographer embossing is on the bottom. It's more like it's not gold embossed, it's just imprinted on the card. So that's sort of a look at the really old stuff for dating that. And we're going to move on into more, looking at more things. We didn't have to look at slides or negatives for this time period because there weren't any. As we move on, we'll have to start looking at other media. So as we go forward, but that's it. That's a look at all the old stuff for today. So questions or comments, or what have you found in your own collections? Hazel.
As you were talking, I remembered that there are Facebook groups that will help you date photos, and but you have to, so like if you post a photo, they will say, oh, it looks like 1920 to me, and then like 400 other people will say what they think. And so none of them are necessarily an expert, but the consensus might be right, or you might at least get some ideas of something else to investigate.
Yes. And I think that's the time when then you can go and look at, if you get a date and go, okay, that makes sense, because if it's somebody in the photo that lived there, okay, grandma was alive in that time period. It's like my grandfather in the Navy. If someone said, well, that looks like beginnings of World War I, then I go, right, oh, that makes sense because grandpa was in the Navy. So yeah. Barbara, you had your hand up. You're muted, my dear.
I know. I do. I actually have exactly that example, Hazel. I was thinking about whether to mention this or not, and well, you just gave me an intro. I can't resist. So, in a previous life, um, where we were exploring the details in photos that the software doesn't matter for the moment. I happened to find a photo that my mother had actually emailed me in 2013. And then she was at the time falling into dementia, and I later took over her care by 2014. And then while sorting through materials, I found this picture I'm going to share with you. Uh, Share button. So I found this picture here in my collection. So this picture doesn't look like any of my relatives at all. You can see this little spot right here, scotch taped to the front, a little note in my aunt's handwriting, so there's no question who it was, saying somebody in a Shriner suit. And that pained me, but here it is. I got the original curved edges there, so we now know somewhere before, what was it, 1910, something like that, 1900. Um, and it's a cabinet card. I got a good scan of it, and I posted it to something like, you know, uh, uh, dating your family photos or something like that on Facebook with some 50,000 subscribers or something like that. And sure enough, there were a whole bunch of people, yes, saying, yeah, it does look like somebody in a Shriner suit. 50 messages later, to your point about the wisdom of crowds, somebody pops up and says, okay, 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 stop. You already know who it is, don't you? And I said, no, actually, I have no idea. And this was like a total mystery, are you sure? Really, I don't. And it turns out that just coincidentally, she had seen, this is again, by this time it's like 2015. So it's um, well before the days of Google Lens, but we were anticipating it already by that point. And she had seen a newsletter with somebody who looked kind of like this. And so she put me in touch with this woman, Linda Jacobs, who was a scholar, anthropologist, I believe, studying the introduction of a Syrian community in New York City in the late 19th century. And she'd been writing books about this for a, small but academic press. And sure enough, she had an entire, can you see the second image? She
Yeah.
had an entire collection of these photos. That's the guy. And she had all the details. She'd been researching this family. Well, this is a blog using the story maps from ArcGIS, but and was done in 2021. But it then goes through and documents this family's stories. So there's my photo, because I took my photo once I had the background and I had an introduction from the scholar. I wrote to this guy's descendants who happened to live in Houston, and gave them back the photo. But she then went and wrote this whole story, which took the history from their perspective and what they knew. And as it turns out, they were Christians in Damascus and coming to the United States, coming to America, trying to decide where they wanted to live. And they traveled all around America deciding where to live. The secret turned out to be that the family was connected in through a Quaker family. And the Quaker family ended up in Richmond, at Earlham College in Richmond, Indiana. And in 1885, I don't know exactly what year this picture was taken, but it appears to have been probably in the late 1870s. So sure enough, in the late 1870s, my great great grandfather was a student, one of the first of the class of Earlham College, which was a college set up for Quakers, Quaker College in Indiana. So I have to think that that's where the connection was, and kind of one of those, nice to meet you kinds of situations. And it was like, ah,
That's a great story.
It is, yeah.
I still don't exactly know, but it's pretty damn close. It was enough to just blow me away.
And also, your Quakers may have known my Quakers
Yeah,
in
Aha.
Indiana.
Indiana. Where in Indiana?
Not so much, not Richmond. I would have to look up Richmond, not
My
America.
family was in Boone County.
No.
Um,
Not
Yeah,
that kind of.
Knightstown in Boone County. And I'm giving a talk, not to be pitching my own thing, but Northwest Indiana Genealogical Society.
Oh,
I'm going to be talking about that story and how in this case you can weave it into an interactive tale to. In fact, that's what's happening when you post to Facebook, when you post to communities, and we forget that we use this kind of stuff all day long. This back and forth between different means to explore, learn more, put back what we learn, create new forms. That's what's happening. And
hmm.
anyway, that's my story.
And it's a great tool. Like it's back to there's so many tools available that it's just sort of knowing where to look and where to get input. And like you said, Hazel, then you sort of look and go, okay, what of all the suggestions I've got fits with what else I know?
Yeah. Once you have it scanned, I use Google Lens all the time to find photos that are similar. Doesn't matter if
Mhm.
it's the same one, just similar. Um, and it's scary. It's downright scary.
So that's what we're going to talk about in Kathy's Corner this for the next couple sessions, or maybe more, since we're only up to the 1800s right now. And then we're going to, as we go along, we'll move into looking at resources for looking at the style of dress and the vehicles and all those things. And then when we hit to the more modern era, we'll start talking about things like counting candles on birthday cakes. And somebody I once, a photo organizer I know once said, if I had a dime for every candle I've counted on a cake, I'd be wealthy. So, but there's all kinds of tips for trying to, we look back at these deep stories from long ago, but even when we're working on our photos more current, sometimes it's like, when did that happen, and where? And in my current part of what we do also in Kathy's Corner is talk about why we started talk about a photo manager now is working on her own photos. And I'm in a part, it's the I got married in 1993, so it's early 1990s, but we took several trips to Alaska, and the photos all got jumbled together because at that point in time I was not even a scrapbooker, or let alone a photo manager. So these photos are all just thrown in envelopes in a bin, and I'm going to get them all digitized. I've decided just to digitize them and then use other sources to try and figure out hopefully when they were taken. But at least I pretty well know some of where they were. But I right now I had all these. I'm a little obsessive in that I'd like them to be together with the particular trip they were from. And so far, not working out too well for me. So I may have to just let go of chronological order and be happy with Alaska trips with future husband prior to the wedding. So,
Actually, Kathy, I've been working on an idea, my Lafayette project, entirely separate, but from that skill set, I'm now working on a way to make it easy for families to do their timelines and then bring in images and things. So it's sort of just on a personal basis.
yeah.
Um, so I'll be soliciting feedback and ideas for ways to what you want to see in that, and then essentially a generic form that anybody can plug their own information in and go with it.
Oh,
That's kind of what I
sounds
had in mind.
I want to sign up for that.
Yeah, you want to toss me an email with things you'd like to see. I'm busy right now, really I am. So it's a back burner thing at the moment. But give me a few weeks, or stuck on something else,
yeah.
or maybe when I have to do my taxes.
That's the good time to get other stuff done when you're supposed to do your taxes. So, Barbara, I'm going to
Exactly.
turn it back to you since it's
Okay,
5 o'clock, and we
right on the dot.
try to respect everyone's time. So I'll flip it back to you to wrap up. And again, thanks, Hazel, for coming. I love it. It was
Thanks for inviting me.
a story.
What a special treat to have a very special guest and spot on with the bathing beauty we are not soon going to forget. It's been a pleasure. Thank you so much, and thank all of you for joining us live, and for all of you who are taking the time to watch this video and explore the links and materials down at the bottom going forward. We do these programs once a month, and you can check this program and all of our Project Kin series now at projectkin.org/events. And yeah, we're updating that all the time. So there's all kinds of fun stuff coming. We are also in all sorts of media, but most of all at projectkin.org, where you can go to our forum, which is very active now, hosted on Substack and also Blue Sky and other social media. Again, thank you so much. I look forward to our next episode with more mysteries.
Thank you. Very good.